It has never been my intention to record every one of Hercule Poirot's cases. Many are bound by private sorrow, and some are so perfectly solved that to explain them would only disturb their quiet beauty. But there are a few, rare and unforgettable, that reveal my friend, not merely as the master of reason, but as a man stirred by something deeper, pity. One such case unfolded in the summer of 1933 at a great country house called Ashcombe Hall. The occasion was a wedding, a day of love, promise, and pale white roses. The bride was radiant, the groom honourable, the guests refined. Everything gleamed, silver, laughter, sunlight, until one could almost forget that perfection never lasts, for beneath that brightness there lingered a stillness too careful to be peace. Before the morning was done, the music would falter, a locked door would stand unanswered, and a secret would bleed through the beauty of that perfect day. I have called this account Hercule Poirot and the Murder Before the Wedding. You're listening to Detective Street. If you enjoy this mystery, do subscribe and tell us in the comments where in the world you're listening from. Chapter 1. The Gathering at Ashcombe Hall. We had come at Lady Honoria's request. Her note had arrived 3 days earlier, delivered by special messenger to our rooms in Whitehaven Mansions. It had been brief and impatient in the manner of those who are accustomed to obedience. I dislike melodrama. A journalist with a taste for it has attached himself to our wedding. Kindly remove him. H. Ashcombe. No salutation, no explanation, no pleas. Poirot had read it twice, folded it with precision, and placed it in the breast pocket of his waistcoat. We accept, Hastings, he had said. This is not a request. It is a command dressed in courtesy. Also, it interests me. A journalist, I had said. Surely that's a matter for the police. The police, Poirot had replied, smoothing his moustache, do not understand nuance. They understand law. But there are matters, mon ami, that require a more delicate touch. A wedding is such a matter. Scandal is another. Now, following miles through corridors lined with portraits of dead Ashcombes, all of them looking faintly surprised to be dead, I wondered what scandal Lady Honoria feared. The house offered us cocoa-coloured panelling, Persian rugs worn thin in patches that suggested generations of the same footsteps, and the sort of hush that money, old money, arranges around itself like a protective cloak. The drawing-room was a triumph of pale silk and shaded lamps. A fire burned with the contained discipline of a fire that knows its place. Lady Honoria rose to greet us from a Louis XV chair that looked as if it had been designed specifically for the purpose of making her formidable. She was all angles and authority, dressed in grey wool that suggested pewter more than cloth. Her lorgnette hung on a silver chain and had the quality of a weapon held in reserve. She was perhaps 60, with the sort of bones that photograph well, and a mouth that had forgotten the habit of smiling without purpose. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings. She did not extend her hand. You are punctual. That is something. Poirot bowed. Lady Honoria, we are at your service. Good. Then you will deal with Mr. Basil Trent. He has taken rooms at the Red Lion in the village and presents himself daily with questions for what he calls a feature article. I want him gone. And if he refuses, then you will make him understand that refusal is not in his interest. Her lorgnette rose fractionally. I am not without influence in certain quarters. I felt a stirring of discomfort. This was not the sort of commission I relished, essentially bullying a member of the press who might well have legitimate business. Poirot, however, inclined his head with that peculiar mixture of deference and calculation that I had come to recognize. Certainement. But first, perhaps, you will introduce us to the wedding party. It is always wise, is it not, to understand the landscape before one begins to dig. Lady Honoria's expression suggested that no one had used a horticultural metaphor in her drawing-room before and survived, but she gestured toward the figures arranged around the room with the careful spacing of a formal photograph. "My niece, Diana," she said. The bride was quieter than I had expected. In my experience, brides tend toward a certain brightness, a nervous gaiety that comes from being the center of attention. Diana Ashcombe was different. She had grey eyes that met yours steadily, a pale oval face framed by dark hair, dressed in the modern fashion, and hands that lay still in her lap without fidgeting. She wore a tea-gown of dove-coloured silk, and at her left shoulder was pinned a spray of orange blossom, a bride's flower, worn early. "Mr. Poirot," she said quietly, "I hope this business won't spoil things. I shall do my utmost to ensure otherwise, mademoiselle." "This is Captain Lionel Reed," Lady Honoria continued, "the bridegroom." Reed stood as we were introduced, a reflex, I thought, from military training. He had the clean lines of a recruiting poster, square jaw, steady eyes, fair hair brushed back from a high forehead. A scar ran along the left side of his jaw, pale against tanned skin, a war wound, I assumed, and felt the usual pang of fellowship and inadequacy. He wore flannels and a tweed jacket that had seen better days, and there was something about him that suggested he was more comfortable in uniform than in civilian clothes. "Captain Hastings," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Flying Corps, I understand. I was with number 24 Squadron. Whereabouts were you stationed?" We exchanged the usual pleasantries, war talk that serves as a sort of password among those who were there. Poirot, I noticed, watched with the expression of an anthropologist observing a tribal ritual he finds quaint but unnecessary. "And this," Lady Honoria said with a faint frost in her voice, "is Mr. Felix Arlen, the best man." Felix Arlen was a contrast to Reed in every way. Dark where Reed was fair, languid where Reed was alert, decorative where Reed was plain. He wore a suit of grey flannel, with a velvet lapel and a silk tie in a shade of peacock blue that suggested artistic sensibilities. His hair was glossed with pomade and arranged in waves that looked expensive. He had the sort of face that appears in society photographs under captions like "Noted playwright at Henley" or "Mr. Arlen's new comedy opens to acclaim." "Charmed," he said, not rising. "Lady Honoria tells me you're here to deal with our little journalist problem. Frankly, I think the chap's rather amusing. Adds colour to what might otherwise be a dreadfully conventional affair." "Your loyalty to your friend is noted," Lady Honoria said icily. "Oh, Lionel and I go back years," Arlen said, waving a hand. "Winchester together, then the war, though I pulled strings and got myself into something more comfortable than the trenches, I'm afraid. Not the heroic type." He smiled at Reed. "Unlike our gallant captain here." Reed's jaw tightened fractionally. "Felix writes plays," he said, as if that explained something. "And this," Lady Honoria continued, "is Miss Cynthia Grey Diana's maid of honour." Miss Grey was small, fair and grave, with the sort of delicate prettiness that photographs as china shepherdesses photograph. Beautifully, but without depth. She wore a dress of pale green that made her look even more fragile than she was, and when she rose to greet us, I caught the faint scent of violets. It was a perfume I recognized. My late wife had worn it in the early days of our marriage. The association brought an unexpected pang. "Mr. Poirot," she said softly. "How exciting to meet you. I've read about your cases in the papers. You are too kind, mademoiselle, and you have known Miss Ashcombe long. Since we were at school together. Diana is my dearest friend." She glanced at the bride with an expression I couldn't quite read. Affection, certainly, but something else beneath it. Anxiety, perhaps, or a kind of watchful concern. Tea arrived on a silver tray carried by a parlour-maid whose cap was pinned at such a precise angle that it might have been set with a protractor. We discussed the wedding arrangements, the church, the flowers, the guest list that read like a page from Debrett's The Rector. Mr. Pritchard arrived shortly after, a mild-eyed man with an apologetic cough and a tendency to peer anxiously at Lady Honoria as if awaiting instructions. He had been at Ashcombe parish for 12 years and clearly understood his place in the local hierarchy. It was after 6 when Basil Trent arrived. We heard him before we saw him. A motor car on the gravel, then voices in the hall, then Miles appearing in the doorway with an expression of profound disapproval. "Mr. Basil Trent," he announced, making the name sound like an accusation. Trent entered with the easy confidence of a man who knows he is unwelcome and enjoys it. He was perhaps 30, lean and dark, with an insolent grace in the way he moved. He wore a suit that had cost money, but looked deliberately careless. Tie loosened, collar unbuttoned at the throat, a typewritten sheet protruding from his breast pocket, as if he had placed it there specifically to be noticed. "Lady Honoria," he said cheerfully, "I do hope I'm not intruding. I was just passing, and thought I'd confirm a few details for tomorrow's piece." He looked around the room, cataloguing faces. Miss Ashcombe, radiant as ever. Captain Reed, congratulations, old man. Miss Grey, charming. Mr. Arlen, still writing those frightfully clever plays about nothing in particular. "Still writing them," Arlen said mildly. "Still having them produced." "What are you writing, Trent, apart from society gossip?" "Oh, I wouldn't call it gossip," Trent said. "I prefer human interest. My readers adore romance. They also adore scandal. But one must hope there won't be any of that here." His smile suggested otherwise. Lady Honoria's lorgnette rose like a judge's gavel. "Mr. Trent, you were not invited to this house. You will leave immediately." Of course. Just wanted to say hello, and to mention that I'll be at the church tomorrow. Front pew, probably. My readers expect thorough coverage." "Your readers," Lady Honoria said, "will have to content themselves with the announcement in the Times. They will not be provided with scandal manufactured by you. Do I make myself clear?" "Perfectly clear, Lady Honoria. Perfectly." He touched his forehead in a mock salute, glanced once more around the room, his gaze lingering on Captain Reed, and left. The room exhaled. Reed's hands, I noticed, had clenched into fists. "Damned impertinence," he muttered. "Yes," said Poirot quietly. "That, or something more." That evening, after a dinner of Dover sole and lamb cutlets eaten in a dining-room where the portraits watched with ancestral disapproval, there was a rehearsal at the parish church. It was a brief affair, conducted under the rector's nervous direction and the cold scrutiny of medieval stone. The church was small and plain, as country churches go. Norman arches, a brass eagle lectern, the smell of damp prayer books and ancient wool. A portable heater hissed in the corner, adding a faint industrial note to the medieval atmosphere. Diana walked through her entrances with mechanical precision. Reed stood at the altar, hands behind his back, as if at parade rest. Miss Grey fussed with the borrowed veil, adjusting folds that didn't need adjusting. Felix Arlen yawned. Poirot watched from a pew at the back, his small figure nearly lost in shadow. I joined him after the rector had dismissed us with apologies for the cold. "What do you make of it all?" I asked. "I make," said Poirot, "that there is something very wrong in this house. An atmosphere, Hastings. It presses down like a hand on the shoulder." "Wedding nerves," I suggested, "perfectly natural." "Perhaps, but consider. Lady Honoria fears this journalist beyond reason. Captain Reed grows rigid when Trent's name is mentioned. Miss Grey smells of violets and watches Diana with the eyes of a nurse watching a fever patient. And the bride, the bride. She is too quiet, too controlled. It is not happiness I see there." "What then?" "Endurance," said Poirot simply. "She endures this wedding as one endures a necessary operation, and that, mon ami, is very curious indeed." When we returned to Ashcombe Hall, Miles met us in the entrance hall with a silver salver on which lay a single envelope. Lady Honoria opened it with a paper knife that looked sharp enough for surgery, read the contents, and without a word threw it into the drawing-room fire. Poirot crossed the room in 3 quick steps, but the paper was already curling, blackening, gone. Only a few words were visible before the flames took them. Midnight. Blue Parlour, or the morning papers. Lady Honoria watched the ash lift, grey and fine, and settle among the coals. "Mr. Poirot," she said quietly, "you will understand why I wished you here." "I begin to, madame. I begin to. I went to bed in a guest room that smelled of lavender and old wood, disliking Basil Trent intensely, and, to my shame, admiring him a little. He had courage, at least, or recklessness, which sometimes looks the same. Outside my window, an owl called across the dark gardens. The house settled around me with small creaks and sighs. I felt the house tighten like a belt, gathering itself for something. It is the sort of detail one writes down later and distrusts as melodramatic. But I write it nonetheless, because it was true. Chapter 2. Death in the Blue Parlour. I was awakened at 9:15 by a scream. Not a loud scream. The walls at Ashcombe Hall were too thick for that, but a sharp, bright sound that cut through the morning quiet like a blade through silk. I pulled onto my dressing gown and ran into the corridor. Other doors were opening. Arlen, his hair dishevelled. Miss Grey, a wrapper clutched around her. Reed, already dressed, moving with military efficiency. We converged on the long gallery where Lady Honoria stood before a closed door, her face composed but very pale. "Mr. Trent!" she called through the oak panels. "Mr. Trent!" Poirot arrived, immaculate as always. How he managed it I never knew, and surveyed the scene with eyes that took in everything. "The Blue Parlour, I presume." "He is not answering," Lady Honoria said. "The door is locked from within. I went to see him this morning, to settle this matter before the wedding. The door was locked. I knocked. There is no reply." "How long have you been knocking?" 5 minutes, perhaps more." "And you are certain he is within?" "I saw him enter last night, at midnight, as his note demanded. We spoke through the door. I would not grant him the satisfaction of entering." He was alive then. The door locked after I left. Poirot bent to examine the lock. The key is in the keyhole on the inside. One can see it if one looks closely. Yes, there, glinting like a polished coin. "Hastings, call through the door, if you please," I called. We all called. We rattled the handle. We hammered on the oak with our fists. No answer came back, except the hollow sound of our own voices. "Could he have left by the window?" I suggested. "We shall see," Poirot said. "But first, we must enter. Madame, your butler has keys." Miles was fetched. He arrived with a ring of keys that jangled softly, and an expression that suggested moral disapproval of the entire proceeding. He tried each key in turn. "None fitted. The key is on the inside, sir," he said unnecessarily. "Unless we remove the hinges." "That will take too long," Poirot said. He looked at the hinges, which were on our side of the door, then at the rug visible beneath the door, a narrow gap, perhaps half an inch. Then he straightened. "We must break the door. There is no other way." Reed stepped forward. "Allow me." It took 3 blows from his shoulder before the lock gave way, with a crack like a pistol shot. The door swung inward, and we crowded after Poirot into the blue parlour. It was a small room, comfortably furnished in the Victorian style. Blue damask wallpaper, a writing table by the window, 2 leather chairs, a Persian rug in shades of azure and cream. The morning light came through mullioned windows that looked out over the gardens, illuminating dust motes that hung in the still air. Basil Trent lay sprawled by the writing table, one arm crooked beneath him, one cheek pressed against the carpet. There was a dark bruise behind his left ear, the size of a crown piece. Beside him on the floor lay a brass paperweight in the shape of a lion, an empire piece, heavy and ornate. The windows were latched from the inside, the catches undisturbed. The telephone receiver hung down from its hook, perfectly still, the cord stretched taut. In the silver ashtray on the writing table, a delicate grey ash lay in small, precise flakes. Poirot knelt beside the body, touching the wrist, the throat, the cooling forehead. When he looked up, his face was grave. "He is dead," he said very gently. "Dead some hours, I think, since midnight, perhaps, or shortly after." Lady Honoria stood in the doorway, very straight. "You see why I dislike melodrama," she said. Diana appeared behind her, still in her dressing gown. She looked at the body without expression, then at Reed, then down at her hands. Miss Grey made a small, stifled sound. Arlen whistled softly. "Good Lord," he said. "The wedding?" "There will be no wedding," Lady Honoria said. "Not today. Not until this is resolved." She looked at Poirot. "Mr. Poirot, do whatever must be done." Poirot rose and brushed dust from his knees. "First, we telephone the police. Then, no one leaves this house. And then—" He touched the paper on the writing table. "We read what Mr. Trent wished us to read." On the writing table lay a single sheet of paper, typed in crisp black letters. "The truth will be told at the altar." "A little theatre," Poirot murmured. "The audience is assembled. But the play, it seems, will not proceed as Mr. Trent intended." I had the impression of a stage on which the curtain had risen an inch too soon, catching the actor unready and exposed. That inch in murder, as in theatre, can be everything. The police arrived within the hour. Inspector Marsh from Reading, a solid man with a moustache that suggested military service, and eyes that suggested he had seen every variety of human stupidity and was prepared to see more. He examined the body, the room, the lock. He questioned each of us briefly, and with the weary courtesy of a man who knows that country house murders are always complications. "Locked room," he said to Poirot. "That's your specialty, isn't it? The papers say you like them." "I do not like them," Poirot said. "But I understand them. They are puzzles of mechanics, not of psychology. And mechanics, Inspector, are often simpler than they appear." "Well, the mechanics here seem clear enough. Chap locked himself in. Someone managed to kill him anyway. Probably came in earlier and hid. There's a cupboard there that would serve. Waited until he was alone, struck him down, and left by some trick with the lock." "The cupboard is too small," Poirot said, "and too full of linen to hide a man. Also, if the killer was hidden, why did Mr. Trent lock the door? He came here to meet someone, not to be alone." "Meeting someone? Who?" "That," said Poirot, "is what we must discover." Chapter 3. Trifles and Lies. Poirot took them one by one, as a tailor takes a garment, turning it, smoothing it, noting where the thread pulls or the seam gapes. We used the morning room for the interviews. It was a cheerful room, despite the circumstances, with windows overlooking the rose garden, and walls papered in a pattern of small yellow birds. The fire had been lit, and tea-things waited on a side table, though no one touched them. Lady Honoria came first. She sat with her back to the light, hands folded in her lap, and answered Poirot's questions with the precision of a woman reading from a prepared statement. "I was in my study from 9 o'clock until I went to wake Mr. Trent. My secretary, Miss Palmer, was with me. We were dealing with correspondence. I have been somewhat behind since the wedding preparations began." "And you heard nothing unusual?" "Nothing. The blue parlour is at the far end of the gallery. The walls are thick." "What did Mr. Trent wish to discuss last night?" Her mouth tightened. "He claimed to have information that would interest the newspapers about my niece, about Captain Reed. He wished to be paid for his silence." "Blackmail." "Precisely." "And did you pay him?" "I didn't. I told him that I would not be threatened in my own house, and that if he attempted to publish anything scandalous, I would see him ruined." He laughed. "And then?" "And then I left. He was alive. The door locked behind me. I heard the key turn." Poirot made a note. "You saw no one else in the corridor?" "No one." "Thank you, madame. Please ask Miss Ashcombe to come in." Diana entered quietly and sat in the chair Lady Honoria had vacated. In the morning light, I could see shadows beneath her eyes. She had dressed carefully, a suit of grey wool, her hair pinned up, no ornament except a small pearl brooch at her throat. But there was a quality of exhaustion about her that no amount of grooming could conceal. "Miss Ashcombe," Poirot said gently, "this must be very distressing for you." "Yes," she said simply. "You were to be married this morning." "Yes." "And now a man is dead. A man who threatened to reveal some secret about you, perhaps." She looked at him steadily. "Mr. Trent was a journalist. Journalists invent secrets when they cannot find them." "That is true, but sometimes they find them. What secret did Mr. Trent believe he had found?" She was silent for a moment, then said, "I don't know. He never told me. Only hinted, with that smile of his." "Where were you this morning between 9 and 9:15? "Walking the terrace to steady my mind." "I often walk when I need to think." "Alone?" "Yes. And you saw no one? Heard nothing?" "Nothing." Poirot studied her. "You do not ask me if Captain Reed is a suspect." "I know he is not," she said quietly. "Lionel could never kill anyone. Not like that. Not with a blow from behind. In war, he killed. In war, yes, but that was different. That was duty. And if he believed this killing was also duty, to protect you, perhaps." She rose. "You're wrong, Mr. Poirot. About Lionel. About everything." She left before he could stop her. Captain Reed came next. He stood rather than sat, hands clasped behind his back, answering questions with military brevity. He had been in the gun-room, he said, checking the shooting records. Lady Honoria liked to know these things for her guests. He had been there from 8:30 until the scream. "You heard nothing? The gun-room is at the opposite end of the house." "You knew Mr. Trent?" "Slightly. He was at Winchester a few years after me." "You disliked him?" Reed's jaw tightened. "He was a gossip and a scandal-monger." "Yes, I disliked him." "He threatened to reveal something at your wedding?" "He hinted at it, but there was nothing to reveal." "Nothing?" "Nothing," Reed said firmly. Poirot glanced down at his notes. "You have ink on your cuff, Captain. The right cuff. You are left-handed." Reed looked at his wrist. A small smudge of blue-black ink stained the white linen. "Yes, I was writing. The records, as I said." "Of course. Thank you, Captain." Felix Arlen entered with the air of a man attending an amusing party. He arranged himself in the chair with studied grace and lit a cigarette. "Terrible business," he said cheerfully. "Quite throws off the whole affair. Diana must be devastated. You were shaving, I believe, when Mr. Trent was killed?" "That's right. Meticulous about these things. Can't appear at a wedding looking like a tramp, can one?" "Your room is where?" "East wing, overlooking the gardens. Lovely view, actually. I've been thinking of setting a play there. Country house, wedding, scandal. Rather writes itself, doesn't it?" "You knew Mr. Trent well?" "Reasonably well. We moved in the same circles. He wrote a rather nasty review of my last play, but I didn't hold it against him. Critics are like weather. One endures them." "Did you know what he intended to reveal?" Arlen's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Not specifically, though I can guess." "And what do you guess?" "That Lionel Reed has a past he'd rather keep buried. Don't we all?" He smiled. "I've said too much. Professional hazard. One learns secrets in the theatre and forgets they're meant to be private." "One more question," Poirot said. "Your boutonniere. Did you wear one last night?" Arlen glanced at his empty lapel. "Did I? I can't remember. Why?" "No reason. Thank you, Mr. Arlen." Miss Grey came last, moving like a china figurine afraid of breaking. She sat on the edge of the chair and twisted a handkerchief in her lap. The scent of violets drifted across the room. "Miss Grey, you were telephoning this morning?" "Yes, about flowers. There was a confusion with the delivery." "And the telephone you used?" "The one in the hall, by the servants' stairs." "You were there. From when? Until when?" "Perhaps 15 minutes. From 9 until 15:15, I think." "And you saw no one?" "No one." Poirot leaned forward slightly. "Miss Grey, you have been friends with Miss Ashcombe for many years." "Since school. She is like a sister to me." "Then you wish her to be happy?" "Of course. And yet you do not seem pleased by this wedding." She looked up, startled. "What do you mean?" "I observe it is my profession. You watch Miss Ashcombe with anxiety. You smell of violets, a perfume that suggests romantic nostalgia, perhaps. And when Captain Reed's name is mentioned, you grow very still." She stood abruptly. "I don't know what you're suggesting, Mr. Poirot. Diana is my dearest friend. I want only her happiness." She left quickly, the scent of violets trailing behind her. After they had gone, Poirot sat in silence, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Well?" I asked. "They all lie," he said simply. "Not about large things, perhaps, but about small things. And small things, Hastings, are often the most revealing." We returned to the blue parlour. Inspector Marsh had finished his examination and removed the body, but the room still held the stillness of recent death. Poirot moved through it like a cat through tall grass, pausing here and there to examine some detail. He picked up the ashtray. The grey ash inside was fine and uniform, foreign in appearance. "Turkish tobacco," he murmured. "Not English. And yet Mr. Trent, I'm told, smoked gold flake." He examined the telephone receiver, still hanging from its cord. He lifted it, smelled it, replaced it carefully. "Violets," he said. "Very faint, but there. And yet Miss Grey claims she was telephoning in the hall, not here." He studied the windows, latched and undisturbed, then the key that still lay where it had fallen. A brass Yale key, brightly polished. "Too brightly polished," Poirot said. "See, Hastings? It shines like new. Yet the other keys in this house are tarnished with age and use. This one has been wiped clean. Recently." "Why?" Beneath the writing table, pressed into the carpet fibres, was a single petal of orange blossom, crushed and brown. "Diana's flower," I said. "Or someone's flower," Poirot corrected. "A flower that has been pinned to a lapel, worn and dropped. But when? And by whom?" He straightened, ticking off points on his fingers. A scent where it should not be. An ash too foreign. A key wiped too bright. A flower out of place. And, he pointed to the typed message on the desk, a type that strikes unevenly. "Regard, Hastings." The letter E sits higher than the rest. A characteristic of old machines, or machines that need adjustment. "Trifles," I said, echoing his own word. "Mais oui, the decoration on the cake is trifling. But bite into it, and you will know if the cake is good or poisoned." He smiled without humour. "And this cake, mon ami, is very poisoned indeed." Chapter 4. The flower on the wrong side. It was in the afternoon, after a silent lunch that no one ate, that Poirot found his pattern. He had sent me to collect photographs from Lady Honoria. Wedding photographs, he said, and pictures from the rehearsal the night before. I thought it an odd request, but I had learned not to question Poirot's methods. I found him in the morning room, the photographs spread before him on a table by the window. He was examining them with a magnifying glass, his expression intent. "Hastings," he said, without looking up. "Come here. Tell me what you see." I looked. They were unremarkable photographs, the sort every wedding produces Diana in her veil, Reed and Arlen in evening dress, the rector looking anxious, Miss Grey adjusting flowers. "I see a wedding party," I said. "What am I supposed to see?" "This one." He pushed forward a photograph from the rehearsal. "What does Captain Reed wear on his lapel?" I squinted. "A boutonnière, orange blossom, I think." "And on which side?" "The left, where one always wears it." "Précisément. Now look at this." He produced a photograph taken that morning, before the discovery of the body. It showed Reed speaking with the inspector in the entrance hall. I looked. The boutonnière was on the right. "Good heavens," I said. "He's changed it. Or rather, mon ami, he has repinned it, after it fell." After he bent to pick up the petal we found beneath the desk in the blue parlour. You mean? I mean that Captain Reed was in that room this morning, that he killed Basil Trent, and that in his haste to leave he tore his boutonniere. Later, in a moment of vanity or habit, for soldiers are meticulous about uniform, are they not? He repinned it. But he pinned it on the wrong side. I sat down heavily. But the locked door was locked from the outside, not from within. Impossible. We saw the key. It was in the lock on the inside. We saw a key, yes, but was it the key? And was it truly locked? He rose and began to pace, his hands clasped behind his back. Consider, Hastings, a door locked from the inside, a key in the lock. These things suggest impossibility. They suggest magic. But there is no magic in murder, only mechanics. Then how? Later, mon ami. First, let me show you the pattern. For once one sees the pattern, everything else becomes clear. He arranged the photographs in a line. The Turkish ash in the ashtray. Captain Reed served in the Near East, Turkey, Egypt, Palestine. He acquired the taste for Turkish tobacco there. The ink on his cuff. He is left-handed, and he was writing, but not shooting records. No, he was writing the little note we found on the desk. The truth will be told at the altar. The old Remington in the gun-room has a fault in the E key. I checked this afternoon. It strikes high, exactly as the E in that note strikes high. But why would he write it? To create a story, Hastings, to make it seem that Trent had written it, that Trent was the threatener, not the threatened. But in truth, Reed was eliminating someone who knew his secret. What secret? Poirot waved his hand impatiently. That we shall discover. But continue. The telephone receiver that smelled of violets, not Miss Gray's scent at all. That was a clever misdirection. No. It was furniture polish. The servants polish the telephone daily. Reed touched it, perhaps to wipe away fingerprints, and the scent transferred, we assumed, violets, because Miss Gray had planted that idea in our minds. And the locked door? Ah, that. Poirot smiled. That is the most simple of all. You remember the key was too bright, too polished. Reed wiped it clean after he killed Trent. But in doing so, he made it suspicious. A key used daily should be tarnished. This one shone. He hung it in the lock from the outside. A simple matter, with a ribbon and a hairpin, which any soldier in France learned to do when breaking into farmhouses. The ribbon runs through the bow of the key. You push the key into position. You pull the ribbon away. Voila. A locked room that is not locked at all. But we tried the door. It wouldn't open. Because Reed was standing in the corridor, Hastings, his shoulder against it. We thought we were trying to wake a dead man. In truth, we were trying to push past a live one. The moment Lady Honoria went to fetch us, he stepped away, and when we returned, the door appeared locked. And so we broke it down, never knowing that Reed himself could have opened it with a gentle push. I felt the way I always felt when Poirot explained his solutions, admiring and slightly foolish. But why kill him? What could Trent possibly know? That, said Poirot. We shall ask Captain Reed himself. Come, Hastings, it is time. We found Reed in the library, standing before the fire with a whisky he wasn't drinking. He looked up as we entered, and I saw that he already knew. Mr. Poirot, he said quietly. Captain Reed. Poirot closed the door behind us. I think you know why we are here. Reed nodded. He set down the glass carefully, as if afraid it might break. Yes, he said. I suppose I do. Tell me, said Poirot, not unkindly. "It will be easier if you tell me." Reed walked to the window and looked out at the gardens, where autumn leaves were falling in the dying light. When he spoke, his voice was steady but hollow, like a man reciting from memory. "His name was Flight Lieutenant James Kendrick," he said. "He was in my squadron, a good pilot, a good man. We were on patrol over the Somme in the autumn of 1917, 40 miles behind enemy lines. His engine took a round. He went down. I saw him crash. He paused. I should have circled back, should have seen if he survived. That's the protocol. You watch for parachutes, for signs of life. But there were 3 Fokkers on my tail. My fuel was low, and I was afraid. So I turned for home. I reported him killed in action. The citation went through his family, was told he died a hero's death." "But he did not die," Poirot said softly. "No, he was captured, sent to a prisoner of war camp near Hamburg. He survived, barely. When he was repatriated in 1919, he was a broken man. Shell-shocked, they call it now. He couldn't testify at any inquiry, couldn't accuse me. No one believed his story. He was mad, you see, or near enough. He died in an asylum 6 months ago." "And Trent discovered this?" "Trent was Kendrick's cousin. He'd been piecing it together for years. Flight logs, witness statements, records from the prisoner camp. He came to me 3 weeks ago. Said he would print the story unless I paid him £10,000. I didn't have it. I tried to reason with him. He laughed." Reed turned to face us. "He said he would read it at the altar, during the ceremony, in front of Diana, in front of everyone. He said it would make excellent copy. 'Coward marries heiress.' That was the headline he had planned. So, you killed him. I went to him this morning. Early, before anyone was awake. I meant only to make him understand, to make him see reason." But he laughed again. "Called me a coward and a murderer, said Kendrick's blood was on my hands." Reed's voice cracked. "I hit him, with the paperweight. I didn't mean to kill him. I swear I didn't mean to." "And then you arranged the little stage," Poirot said. "The locked door, the note, the ash in the tray, your own tobacco, smoked, to suggest someone else had been there." "Yes." Reed looked at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. "I wiped everything, locked the door from outside, learned that trick in France, as you guessed, came back to my room, but I'd torn my boutonniere when I knelt to check if he was breathing. I pinned it back on. Didn't realize I'd put it on the wrong side until you pointed it out." There was a long silence. The fire crackled. Outside, a bird called once, then stopped. "Captain Reed," Poirot said gently, "what you did in the war, that was fear. What you did this morning, that was also fear. But the law does not distinguish, it cannot. You must tell the inspector what you have told me." Reed nodded slowly. "I know." He looked towards the door. "What about Diana?" "Mademoiselle Diana," said Poirot, "will grieve, and then, perhaps, she will understand. We are all of us, monsieur, more fragile than we appear." Chapter 5. The Justice That Stands Upright. We assembled in the morning room at 7 o'clock that evening. Inspector Marsh had been summoned. The wedding party gathered with the reluctance of prisoners awaiting sentence. Lady Honoria sat in her customary chair, spine straight, lorgnette in hand. Diana stood by the window, looking out at the dark gardens. Miss Grey sat beside her. Pale and silent, Felix Arlen sprawled in an armchair with studied casualness, but his fingers drummed nervously on the arm. Mr. Pritchard, the rector, had been asked to attend. Why, I couldn't fathom. But Poirot's invitations are never accidental. The lamps were lit against the November dusk. The fire ticked with small explosions of resin. Outside, rain had begun to fall, tapping against the windows with delicate insistence. Poirot stood before the mantelpiece, small and neat, his hands folded across his waistcoat. Inspector Marsh leaned against the wall, notebook ready, expression sceptical. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot began, "we are here because a man has been killed. Mr. Basil Trent died this morning in the Blue Parlour, struck down by a brass paperweight. His body left in a room that appeared to be locked from within. It seemed, for a time, to be an impossible crime. But as I have often said, there is no such thing as an impossible crime. There are only crimes whose methods have not yet been understood." He paused, letting the words settle. "Let me begin with what we know. Mr. Trent was a journalist, not a good one, perhaps, but an energetic one. He had discovered something about Captain Reed, something from the war, something that would have destroyed Captain Reed's reputation, and by extension, this wedding. He demanded money for his silence. When the money was not forthcoming, he threatened to reveal his information at the ceremony itself." Diana turned from the window. "What information?" she asked quietly. Poirot looked at Reed. "Captain?" Reed stood very straight, hands at his sides. He told the story again. Kendrick, the crashed plane, the failure to return, the accusation of cowardice. His voice was steady, but his face had gone grey. When he finished, Diana said nothing. She simply looked at him as if he were a stranger she was trying to recognize. "This morning," Poirot continued, "Captain Reed went to the Blue Parlour to confront Mr. Trent one final time. There was an argument. Captain Reed struck Mr. Trent with the paperweight that lay on the desk. Mr. Trent died quickly, I think, which is at least a mercy." "Then Reed panicked?" Inspector Marsh asked. "No," said Poirot. "That is the curious thing. Captain Reed did not panic. He planned. He cleaned the scene. He typed a note on the Remington in the gun room. The note we found on the desk, suggesting that Trent himself had written a threat. He smoked a Turkish cigarette to leave ash that might confuse us. He wiped the key clean of fingerprints. Too clean, as it happened. And he locked the door from the outside using a technique learned in France, a ribbon through the key's bow, pulled from the corridor." "But we saw the key in the lock," I protested, "from the inside." "We saw a key in a lock, mon ami. We assumed it was locked, but when we tried the door, Captain Reed was standing in the corridor, his weight against it. The door seemed locked. It was not, and when Lady Honoria left to fetch us, he simply stepped away. The door could then be broken open, and we would all believe that it had been locked from within all along. It was ingenious, I had to admit, simple, but ingenious. In his haste to leave," Poirot continued, "Captain Reed tore his boutonniere, the orange blossom pinned to his lapel. A petal fell and was crushed beneath the desk. He retrieved the flower. But later, from habit or vanity, he repinned it. And because he was thinking of other things, of murder, of fear, of consequences, he pinned it to the wrong side. The left became the right." Poirot produced the photographs. "Here, you see, is the rehearsal last night. The flower is on the left. Here, this morning, it is on the right, a small thing, a trifle. But trifles, ladies and gentlemen, do not lie. People lie. Trifles tell the truth." Reed said nothing. He stood as if at attention, waiting for the court-martial he knew was coming. "The question," Poirot said, "isn't whether Captain Reed killed Mr. Trent. He did. He has admitted as much to me, and will, I trust, admit it now to Inspector Marsh. The question is why. Not why he killed Trent. That is obvious. Blackmail, exposure, shame. But why he was vulnerable to blackmail in the first place." He turned to Reed. "You are not a coward, monsieur. I have studied your record. You have decorations for valor. You have flown missions that would make braver men weep. So why did you leave Flight Lieutenant Kendrick to his fate?" Reed's jaw worked. "I told you. I was afraid. 3 Fokkers on my tail. Low fuel." "No," Poirot said gently. "That is what you told yourself. That is what you have told yourself for 7 years. But it is not the truth, is it?" Reed stared at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean," said Poirot, "that you did not abandon James Kendrick out of cowardice. You abandoned him because you were already wounded. The medical records show you were treated for a shoulder injury the day you returned from that patrol. A bullet had grazed you. You were losing blood. You were, in fact, barely conscious when you landed. Is this not so?" Reed's face contorted. I don't remember. It was so long ago." "You do not remember because you were in shock, but others remember. Your mechanic, your squadron leader. They all noted your condition. They wondered why you did not claim a wound decoration. They assumed modesty. But it was not modesty, was it? It was guilt. You felt you should have stayed, should have helped Kendrick, and so you told no one of your wound. You let them think you had flown home untouched. You let yourself believe you were a coward rather than accept that you had done all you could." There was a long silence. Rain tapped at the windows. The fire settled with a soft collapse of coals. "Is it true?" Diana asked. Reed looked at her. His eyes were wet. "I don't know," he said hoarsely. "I don't remember. But yes, perhaps it is." Poirot nodded. "Guilt, mademoiselle, is a very strange thing. It makes us believe the worst of ourselves. It makes us accept accusations we should reject. And when Mr. Trent came with his story, Captain Reed believed it, believed he was a coward, believed he deserved exposure. And so, in desperation, he killed to prevent that exposure. He killed not to hide a crime, but to hide what he believed was a weakness." He looked at Reed with something like pity. "But it was not weakness, monsieur. It was survival, and survival is not shameful." Inspector Marsh cleared his throat. "That's all very touching, Mr. Poirot, but it doesn't change the facts. Reed killed a man. He'll have to answer for it." "Oui," Poirot said. "He will answer, as he must. But let the court hear all the truth. Not only the truth Mr. Trent would have told, but the truth I tell now. Let the jury understand not only the deed, but the man who did it, and let them judge accordingly." Reed straightened. "Thank you, Mr. Poirot," he said. I think I can face it now." "Can you?" Poirot asked. "Then tell Inspector Marsh everything. Hold nothing back. It is the only way." Reed nodded. He turned to Diana one last time. "I'm sorry," he said, "for all of it, for the lie we were about to live." Diana's voice was barely audible. "So am I," she said. Inspector Marsh took Reed by the arm, gently, I noted, with more compassion than I would have expected. They left together, Reed walking with his head up, shoulders back, like a soldier marching to an execution. The room exhaled. Lady Honoria rose, gathered her lorgnette, and departed without a word. Felix Arlen followed, shaking his head. Mr. Pritchard approached Poirot with moist eyes. "That was kindly done, Mr. Poirot," he said. To give him that. The truth about his wound. "It was the truth," Poirot said. "Nothing more." "Was it?" the rector asked gently. "Or was it the truth you wish to be true?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Perhaps, mon père, they are the same thing." After they had gone, Diana remained by the window. Miss Grey stood beside her, uncertain, her hand hovering near Diana's shoulder, but not touching it. "Miss Ashcombe," Poirot said, "I'm sorry. This is not the day you imagined." She turned. Her face was composed, but her eyes held a kind of relief I had not expected. "No," she said. "But perhaps it is better this way. I was marrying him out of duty, Mr. Poirot. Not love. I thought duty was enough. I see now it isn't." "And what will you do?" "I don't know." She looked at Miss Grey, and something passed between them. A glance, a question, an answer. "But I think I shall start by being honest, with myself, if no one else." She left then, and Miss Grey followed, the scent of violets trailing behind them, like a question Poirot and I walked out into the November evening. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and cold. The motor car waited to take us to the station. Behind us, Ashcombe Hall stood against the darkening sky, its windows glowing with light that looked warm from outside, but which I knew, from experience, could be very cold within. "The wedding didn't take place," I said, as we settled into the car. "The bride is alone. The groom will likely hang. Was this justice, Poirot?" He was silent for a moment, watching the house recede behind us. "Justice, mon ami, is not always what we wish it to be. It is not always kind. It does not always make people happy. But it is necessary. Like surgery, yes? It cuts away the diseased tissue so that healthy tissue may grow. And what will grow here? Truth, perhaps, or at least the possibility of it. Reed will tell his story. A court will judge. And Miss Ashcombe will not marry a man she does not love, which is perhaps a small mercy in a day of little mercy. You sound almost content." "Not content, Hastings, merely. Resigned. We did what we could. We found the murderer. We spoke the truth. What comes after? That is for others to decide." The car turned onto the London road, and the lights of Ashcombe Hall disappeared behind a stand of elms. I thought of Diana at the window, looking out at the dark gardens. I thought of Reed in a police cell, finally free of his lie. I thought of Kendrick in his grave, vindicated at last, but unable to know it. "The lilies," I said suddenly. "They were to be delivered this morning. For the wedding." "They will have wilted by now," Poirot said. "Lilies do not last long, once cut." "No," I said, "they don't." We rode in silence after that, watching the countryside slide past in shades of black and grey. Somewhere ahead, London waited with its lights and noise, and the comfortable illusion that such things as happened at Ashcombe Hall happened only in houses far away, to people unlike ourselves. But Poirot and I knew better. We had seen the truth too often to believe in comfortable illusions. We had seen that murder grows not from evil, but from fear. That guilt can be more destructive than any crime. That the dead haunt us not because they are gone, but because they remind us of what we failed to do when they were alive. "Poirot," I said as we reached the station. "Yes, mon ami." "You said Reed's wound, the shoulder injury. You said the records proved it. Did they?" He looked at me with eyes that held a century of kindness and sorrow. Does it matter, Hastings? I suppose not, I said. But later, alone in my flat, with a whisky I didn't want, and a newspaper I couldn't read, I wondered. I wondered if Poirot had invented that wound to give Reed something to hold on to in the dark months ahead. I wondered if truth sometimes needed to be created rather than discovered. And I wondered if that made Poirot a liar or a saint. I never asked him. Some questions, I had learned, are better left unanswered. We serve justice as best we can, but we are not justice itself. We are only men, stumbling through the dark, trying to light a candle here and there against the night. If that candle illuminates truth, so much the better. If it only illuminates mercy, perhaps that is enough. The newspapers carried the story for a week. Captain Lionel Reed, they said, had killed a blackmailer in a moment of passion. The trial was brief. The verdict was manslaughter. He was sentenced to 7 years, but served only 4, emerging in 1929 a quieter man. Sadder, but somehow more complete. Diana Ashcombe never married. She lived quietly at Ashcombe Hall with her aunt until Lady Honoria's death in 1934, then moved to a cottage in Cornwall where she painted watercolours of the sea and declined all interviews. Cynthia Grey married a country doctor in 1927 and was, by all accounts, content. Felix Arlen wrote a play about a country house murder in 1926. It ran for 6 weeks in the West End and was universally panned as implausible. And Hercule Poirot, as always, moved on to the next case, the next body, the next tangle of lies and truth that required his particular genius to unravel. But sometimes, late at night, when the fog pressed against the windows of Whitehaven mansions and the city slept beneath its blanket of coal smoke and rain, I would catch him staring into the fire with an expression I couldn't quite read. "What are you thinking, Poirot?" I would ask. "Of justice, mon ami," he would reply, "and whether we serve it or whether it serves us." And then he would rearrange the cushions on his chair until they sat at perfect right angles, and pour himself a tisane, and the moment would pass. But I remembered Ashcombe Hall. I remembered the way the house had tightened like a belt, the way the lilies had bruised in the cold, the way Diana had looked at the window with relief in her eyes. I remembered that sometimes the truth is not enough. Sometimes mercy is required. And sometimes, just sometimes, the two are the same thing, seen from different angles in different lights. That is what I learned at Ashcombe Hall, on the day a wedding didn't happen and a man confessed to a murder that was both crime and tragedy, guilt and salvation, end and beginning all at once. It is, I think, the truest thing I know.